it's really awesome to be here in Taipei. This is our 8th Channels Forum in APAC. So far, we've managed to use a different country every year, and I'm pleased to tell you that next year we'll be using a different country too, and we're going to announce that at the closing session tomorrow afternoon. So we keep taking everyone on a tour through Asia. And as we move forward running events, one of the things we've discovered is the world is getting unstable. A few weeks ago, we ran our event in Barcelona in Europe. That's the safest place to run an event in Europe, the most predictable place to run an event. And there were riots on the streets and the airport closed the day before our event started. Luckily, it reopened and our event went on to be a good success. But the world is becoming more unstable. And that is impacting those of us who do events, but it's impacting all of you. There is a very clear message of what is happening. First of all, we all know of the protests that have now gone on for many months in Hong Kong. But it's not just protests in Hong Kong in this region that are disrupting business. We've also seen mass protests in Jakarta, and more recently, students protesting in Delhi. Around the world, there are protests taking place in Santiago in Chile, in La Paz in Bolivia, in Bogota in Colombia. The level of political disconnect between the haves and the have-nots is growing, and we are seeing the consequences come out in a number of different ways. Also, of course, the rise of certain political leaders. We can't solve that problem for you. But for the channel partners here today who come from Hong Kong, we can share our sympathies because, again, running a business in Hong Kong has been one of the best places in the world for the last 30 years. It was unpredictable that suddenly they would go into this crisis that they now face. And what does that mean for leaders? It means leaders have to be more flexible. They have to react to change. They have to be nimble. Old certainties don't carry on into new predictabilities. And flexibility and ability to react to change is now becoming the number one business requirement. And of course, it's partly about politics and the clash between the haves and the have-nots, but it's also climate change. Australia being devastated by bushfires recently. The typhoon that disrupted the Rugby World Cup and led to several deaths in Japan. Perhaps less surprisingly, but there's also been a typhoon in Manila this week. There are droughts in Chennai. There are droughts in the Mekong Delta. So that ships that used to go, or boats that used to go down the canals can currently not pass. So we have a twin problem of politics and climate sustainability impacting our business. It's incumbent of all of us, and especially the big companies, to do more to create sustainable businesses and environmentally aware businesses. And that's something we'll be looking for our sponsors to talk to, the ability to create a circular economy. Recycling of tech goods is difficult to make money from. It just about pays its way. But what we are seeing is a rise in the second-hand goods market, particularly in smartphones, obviously, but also in areas like PCs, servers, storage. Taking products that have been in use for 3-4 years in a rich country and then maybe shipping them to a poorer country where they're still in high demand. Some of you can make good money by focusing on second-hand goods. And then on top of the need to create a more sustainable environment and the changing politics around the world, there are also some self-inflicted conflicts. The trade war between the US and China has clearly led to a slowing of the Chinese economy, a shift of manufacturing out of China, and also increasingly creating a two-tier tech industry where, for example, in 5G, we may end up with a Chinese set of standards and a Western set of standards. And for many of you in your different countries, you're going to have to choose whether we go on the Western path or the Chinese path, or try and manage somewhere in between. So the trade war has created another uncertainty and led to this shift in manufacturing. And of course, it's not just between the US and China. Also, the tension between South Korea and Japan is something else that's causing unsurprising difficulties. Inside those difficult environments, where the global economy is certainly slowing, not crashing, but slowing, China is slowing, India is slowing, US is stable, Europe is slowing, there are some pockets of success. And it's worth calling out to our friends from Japan in the room. Japan is today the hottest tech market. There's been a lot of activity. The symbol of the activity in Japan is very much the World Cup, which has already been mentioned, the Rugby World Cup, and now, of course, next year, the Tokyo Olympics. That's creating new energy and new excitement. But also there was a very clear decision by corporate Japan to do a Windows 10 refresh that has led to an awful lot of activity and replacement cycles. And I mentioned the trade war already and manufacturing shifting out of China. And we talked a lot about this in last year's presentation when the trade war had really just started. And there are some countries benefiting from that. Manufacturing is shifting here to Taipei. And Taiwanese companies that were building in China are starting to again build back in Taiwan. Also, we're seeing manufacturing move to Thailand and move to Vietnam. Those are the three countries that are winning from this shift. India is beginning to look more and more at what has gone on in China in terms of China's ability to create homegrown, successful internet companies like Alibaba, Tencent, TikTok, for example. And India is doing more and more to try and stop the rise of the Western tech world by changing taxation systems, particularly around, say, online shopping, in order to build more local champions. And it will be a key thing to watch in India, whether that strategy can be, that was worked so well in China for the Chinese, can be replicated in India. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about where the channel is. And as the video already told you, I think Anirudh said very nicely, I think a part of our job in this conference is to promote the success and the opportunities for each of you. So I want to give you a very simple message. When you're going to your shareholders or you're going to your banks and you're asking for money, they'll all say to you, why should we invest in your business? What's your future? I was with one of the top tech companies a few weeks ago, and they said to me, the traditional channel. A lot of people describe you as a traditional channel. But I said to them, the traditional channel's growing faster than you are. What gives you the right to call them traditional? The channel's doing very well. And the next 5 to 10 minutes of this presentation, I aim to convince you of how rich your opportunities are. So when you go to your shareholders and your investors, there's a very simple slide. You just need to show them this slide. At the end of 2018, around the world, 16.7 billion devices were connected to the internet. It's a big number. That's roughly over 2 devices per person. And we are predicting the rise of 5G and the availability of Wi-Fi 6 is going to lead to those number of devices doubling by 2023. So there'll be 32 billion devices connected to the internet. Now, they might be cars, they might be smartphones, they might be cameras, they might be robots, vacuum cleaners, lawnmowers, obviously PCs and other technology products. Each of those products needs to be sold and needs to be maintained and needs to be delivered perhaps as a service. That's your job. Very simple core mission, to deliver these devices that connect to the internet and maintain them. As that market doubles, if you go down that journey with the industry, you're going to do very well, I promise you. But also, equally, as we see a doubling of devices over the next 5 years, just think about the amount of data that creates. And all of that data needs to be managed, stored, backed up, disaster recovery procedures in place, and security in place. So first selling the devices and then managing all the data should be enough to convince any investor that the next 5 years in your business will be very, very strong. We promise you it will be. Have confidence, invest, take some bets. The industry is coming in our direction. More and more industries, whether transportation or healthcare or education or finance, are becoming technology companies. They need our goods. Now, how's the industry itself doing? Well, we thought we'd look at the key categories inside the industry and share with you the latest data. So this data is for the first 3 quarters of the year, looking at the global performance and the performance in Asia. First of all, networking remains strong, particularly wireless. Wireless networks are needed everywhere, and the demands of the users go up and up and up in terms of bandwidth and latency, so networks need to be replaced and upgraded. 5% global growth, 4% growth in Asia. However, 2018 was a very strong year for the server market. That's changed in 2019. It's down 6% so far on a global basis and 5% in Asia. And the Chinese server market is particularly dragging these numbers down. There's been a real slowdown in tier 1 hyperscale spending on servers in China. We have to accept that some of the cause for this is the shift from on-premise computing to cloud computing has impacted this. And the hyperscalers made massive investments in 2018. They've slowed those investments in 2019, and we've seen the impact on the server market. There is a shift. There is still a need, obviously, for hybrid and multi-cloud computing, and I'll come back to that point. But right now, we are seeing an impact. Storage, on the other hand, because the amount of data is exploding, continues to be a healthy market, with Asia outgrowing the rest of the world at 5%. The smartphone market has plateaued. There is a lack of innovation currently. All phones look the same. And probably there's a pause of 5G, waiting for 5G, which is coming very soon in South Korea, in Japan and China, and then everywhere else, which should give a new round of replacement cycles. There's also some interesting form factors coming very soon, and I think you'll see some of those on stage today to give new life to the smartphone market. The PC market, down 2% globally in units, down 3%. That's all PCs. But the commercial PC market has been growing, while the consumer PC market has slowed significantly. There are pockets of PC market in the consumer space that are strong. Any of you who are kids, you all know what they want for their next present is a gaming PC. It's really hot. But commercial PCs are strong. We're seeing adoption. We're seeing prices rise. We're seeing premium thin and light notebooks become particularly popular. And PCs that used to be just a tool to get the job done are increasingly an HR issue. Your ability to attract good employees partly depends on what computers you give them to use. But there are two hotspots in the industry today. The public cloud, which is growing 38% around the world and 52% across Asia. There's no question that digital transformation is driving public cloud adoption. Vendors, customers using a mix. AWS, Microsoft are very much leading that. Google trying to catch up. And Alibaba doing very well in China, struggling to internationalize outside of China, but certainly on that journey. Everything to do with public cloud consulting, migration, lift and shift is hot. You need to have that as part of your go-to-market model. The other area that's particularly hot is security. Asia has underinvested in security, but is just beginning to catch up and wake up to all the risks that are in place in the security world. There is a real battle royale now taking place between the infrastructure providers like Dell, HPE, Huawei, Inspur, Lenovo, NetApp, and the public cloud providers who I've already mentioned. The infrastructure providers have probably not done a good enough job of selling against the public cloud. It is not true that the public cloud is cheaper. It's not true. It's not true that the public cloud provides pay-as-you-go services. Well, in fact, it is true, but if you're foolish enough to sign a contract that lets you pay as you go, you pay a lot as you go. You're much better off predicting and committing to a minimum amount of spend. That's how you get the best prices. But somehow the image of the industry is slightly different to the reality. The infrastructure vendors need to do a better job of selling against the public cloud. But what we are seeing now emerge is the key battleground in the industry. This is why IBM spent more than $30 billion buying Red Hat last year. The ability to be able to move data and applications from on-premise or a private cloud to a public cloud and maybe back again, to optimize for latency and for pricing. We are seeing a phenomenal battle here. VMware is far ahead. Nutanix and Red Hat trying to catch up. Whoever controls the plane between the compute and the customer will be in a very, very lucrative position to sit between and almost take the brand of the boxes away from the customer and own the management interface. There's been massive amounts of progress in terms of what is possible. VMware, within 2 years, signing up AWS and then signing up Microsoft Azure to able to offer real multi-platform, multi-cloud solutions. That is the hottest battleground in the industry. We have a very clear recommendation. You need to work with at least 2 of these inside your portfolio so that you have a choice for customers and you have multiple bets. But as these companies become the key control plane of the compute infrastructure, there is an interesting question mark. Are customers prepared to be locked in to one of those 3 management platforms? They're going to put all their eggs in one basket. Customers are rather nervous to make such a big commitment to one platform. But also, if you're AWS or Azure, do you really want your customer to be owned by the layer above you? So the interesting question is, will the forces of the customers and the suppliers allow these 3 platforms to control the industry or not? That is the battleground inside the technology industry today, the biggest battleground inside the technology industry today. Now, I bet there's a group of companies that you guys are jealous of. The global system integrators. You go through every airport, and they seem to be the ones advertising the most. Accenture, through many acquisitions of small specialists born in the cloud companies, has become the largest provider of public cloud services in the world. And the other global system integrators are catching up. So we've done a little bit of analysis about how well these companies are doing. And I wanted to share something with you. By the way, it's very easy to predict share prices retrospectively. Had you invested in these companies 5 years ago, you would have doubled your money. It's been a very strong performance. Global accounts, committing to global system integrators, a lot of digital transformation projects. They've done very well. But if there's one slide I want you to take away from this presentation and reuse and think about, is what we call the IT channel has comfortably outperformed the global system integrators. But nobody knows it. Nobody talks about it. But had you invested in the leading, I'm afraid these are European and US companies because nearly all of you are private. If you invested in the leading channel partners over the last 5 years, you would have tripled your money. The channel is on fire. Investors are recognizing it. We're seeing private equity investing in channel companies. Most recently, the Apollo acquisition, or likely acquisition of Tech Data. We're seeing public investment markets and private investment markets do very well. Now, I want to give you another message. There are some American competitors of ours who tell you the channel doesn't have a future. It's run by aging people. They haven't transformed. They are completely wrong. It's nonsense, and particularly for the channel press here. Please get the facts right. The channel around the world is doing incredibly well. The big partners are doing well, and the smaller partners, from every survey we do in every country, is comfortably outperforming the performance of the technology vendors and the economies. We're a sector on fire, and that should be great news, and what you're talking to your investors about. Your only thing holding you back is your confidence to believe in yourselves.